Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to a special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr., and I am thrilled to have today's guest. He is the author of a fabulous new book called Red Clay Suzie, and it is the captivating tale of a young boy and his journey through self-discovery in the rural South. And it's a fabulous read, and I am so excited to have the author, Jeffrey Dale Lofton, with us today. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, good. Me too. When I tell you I love this book, it was a fabulous read. I love your use of language. I was very drawn in by the almost poetic style. I believe the names that I used in reference to your use of language were Tennessee Williams, Stephen King, and Maya Angelou.
I am taken aback. That is some high praise. I'm so thankful. Thank you. That's
Thank
great.
you.
I
Yeah,
love all of those writers. They are, they're so inspiring and it's so different. So for you to find something in Red Clay Suzie that reminds you of them is just, it blows my mind. It's everything.
well, the reason why I picked those three, it's like I said, you have this poetic use of words and the way you can turn a phrase, but also there is a comfort in the language style. Like you can settle in and, just be supported by the words and the story. And that's not something that I find too often, actually.
Well, though I believe Red Clay Suzie has universal appeal for people of any walk of life, and there are some universal themes and experiences. I'm a long time student of Southern literature, and what excites me so much about Southern literature is just how quirky some of the characters in those worlds can be. They languish in their oddities, those people who inhabit those Southern stories. And there's such an interesting cadence to the language. It almost drips with tree sap. It's just so languid and operatic in the way that it's written. And I've heard that kind of storytelling my entire life, and I've certainly read so much Southern literature. So that's what I wanted to do with this story. I wanted to create one of those kinds of stories that, was relatable to everybody. And and I can tell you about the story if you like, but I really wanted to create a sense of place. And in fact, Red Clay Suzie. So Red Clay, the title, Red Clay Suzie. Red Clay is, and this is a jar of Red Clay Suzie, of Red Clay in a Duke's mayonnaise jar. This is not a commercial, but this is a Duke's mayonnaise jar. Duke's is all over the South. My parents and my older brother properly washed and cleaned and dried these Duke's mayonnaise jars and dug up red clay from the yard and sent them to me here where I live now in Washington, D.C. And I take these with me when I go to personal appearances. And if you could just, I wish you could smell this. I wish you could feel it. It's just, red clay is it makes an indelible mark on anyone who walks it and lives on it. And it's everywhere in Georgia, anyway, where I grew up. And I wanted to follow another tradition of Southern literature, which is to really create a sense of place. And Red Clay Suzie certainly is a character in this book. And I won't tell you anything about Suzie. You have to read the book
Right.
to understand who Suzie is. But definitely the sense of place is very Southern inspired.
I was going to say the clay actually is another character in the book. It feels like.
Yeah,
Also,
I wanted it to be.
yeah,
I'm glad that you think it did.
definitely. The clay and also classic cars
So
also are a
yeah,
big character role in the story. I noticed.
yeah. Well, just like the protagonist Philbert, we have a lot of things in common. Red Clay Suzie is it's the kind of story one would call a fictionalized memoir, and it is indeed based on my life growing up gay with a significant skeletal deformity in the Deep South, and specifically rural Georgia. And some of the characters are products of my imagination, but the important pivotal characters are inspired by people in my life. And um, but Ray Clay Suzie's protagonist Philbert is essentially telling my story, and he, like me, I am obsessed with cars, and it all started with this little Matchbox car. This is a green 1968 Mercury Cougar. And if you know
It's
Matchbox cars,
real.
it's real. Size of a Matchbox, and some of them had moving pieces, a trunk that opens, a hood. This one has doors that open. And I would imagine that this car had wings and was a real live creature, magical creature. And this little car and I flew to places that only existed in my imagination. And it was a salvation of sorts for a really isolated and lonely little boy, because I could escape to places that existed up here. And so, yes, I'm obsessed with cars. To this
Mm.
day, I can catch the slightest glimpse of a fender or a tail light, and I can give you the year, make, and model of that car. And I think you might
Mm.
describe me as a car savant.
Okay. Yeah, my partner and co-host, I refer to her as a car queen all the time because same thing. She can see a car go by and go, "That's a 68 blah blah blah." And I'm like, "That's a superpower
Yeah,
because I have no idea. It's blue. That's all I got. I don't."
I can relate to her. I certainly can. It represented they were magical beings. They were pieces of art, and they occupied my so much of my time. They made me feel safe. They were destinations in and of themselves, much less where they could take you.
Right.
So yeah, they're very special to me, and they still remain that way.
I love it. I love it. Um, so you touched on it a little bit. You said this was a fictionalized memoir.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how much of your story would you say is Philbit's story?
Hmm. Well, like Philbit, I was born gay with a physical malformation of the chest in Warm Springs, Georgia. Like Philbit, I was born to a family that was just simply not equipped to deal with a child like me, a very different child. And it wasn't neglect. I'm not suggesting that. But it was more. It was parenting through love and fear, and equal parts love, fear, and ignorance. And they did the best
Mm,
they could, given um, that we were in a small conservative community, and I was such an odd, different child. Um, and so that's that's how we're similar. Not to give away too much, but here's an example, another example from the book. Like Philbit's daddy, my own was shot in the head while trying to break up a domestic dispute at the
mm,
gas station, the filling station convenience store that sat across the road from our house. And while that the core event is true, I changed the details of the event for the story. So that's an example of why I think Red Clay Suzie is it's based on fact, but it's not bound by fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an example of similarity. Um, there are some friendships that didn't exist. James is a character who I did not have that particular friend in grade school, primary school, all the way through high school. And James is insightful and funny and wise, and he is an outsider. James is Black and lives in a world where racism is just conscious and unconscious racism is just a fact of life.
Right.
And he's an outsider in this world. He and Philbert are kindred spirits in that way. But James is fundamentally different, and he helps Philbert see the world as a more inclusive place. And their friendship is actually, I think, it's an example of a true north friendship, and I did not have that friendship growing up, and I wanted to explore that. There was a boy who inspired the character of James, and I was too afraid to ask him if he wanted to be my friend. I was afraid of being rejected. And so this is a way of creating a story of what might have been had I had the courage to act.
I feel
right
like
or wrong, I guess.
Right. I feel like that's a running theme throughout the story, the idea of fear of rejection and basically playing both sides of the story in your mind, like what would life be like if I actually say or do the thing, and what is my life going to be like if I never say or do the thing. And I related to that because you always can get hung up on imagining the path not taken. Talk to me a little bit about that element a little bit, because with the character of Knox in particular, that whole idea of romanticizing what could be. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the what could have been if I'd only made a different decision, if I'd had the strength to make the more difficult but ultimately more meaningful choice. And the story is, what I wanted to show is the very strong impact of not being allowed to be one's authentic self. We don't make our best decisions. Mm-hmm. We don't live life as fully if we aren't comfortable being ourselves. And the people around us have a huge, huge role in how we see ourselves, how we think about ourselves. It has less of an impact on some people because they're stronger naturally. They think, I know the way through this. But for others, and I was one of those others, always looking into a world that just never made sense. It didn't square with what I felt deep down inside of me, in my heart. So I called myself a fringy, living life on the outside and knowing that I was different on the inside and the outside, and spending an inordinate amount of energy trying to hide myself, both the physical self and what was on the inside. And so,
yes,
like Philbert, I made choices that were not the best choices. And I missed experiences and relationships that could have been so wonderful and fulfilling and could have sustained me through hardship. And one of the reasons I think I did that was because I just hadn't figured it out. And the forces around me shaped those decisions. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this story and put it out there. I originally wrote it for myself, all these years of frustration and humiliation sort of, were pushed down. I pushed them down inside of me. Bullying, body shaming, humiliation. But when I went to college, It was the first time I was away from that environment. It wasn't that far away. It's 30 miles down the road, but I went and was on my own for the first time. And everything sort of came out, and I instinctually started writing about it. It's a way to deal with it. So I was writing for myself. It was an exorcism by exposition. That's how I've begun to think of it.
See, that turning of the phrase, that's what I'm talking about.
That experience, I started writing it for myself, but I ultimately finished writing it for others who are younger now and having a horribly rough time of it. Because I wanted this to be a roadmap of sort, not a geographic roadmap that you roll your car around on, but a roadmap inside one's heart and mind, as a roadmap to a better place, being one's authentic self. That's what I was going for. So ultimately, that's why I finished writing it, for other people, not for myself.
I love it.
And in fact, here's an interesting statistic. This is really one of the reasons I decided, before I was even finished with it, that it was really for other people and not for myself. 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered killing themselves last year.
Yes.
That I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe it. It just, and I thought, this is not for me. This is for other people. One more affirming story, one more roadmap to help those who are struggling find their own way, to know that it's really a matter of putting the next day in front of them and getting through it to the next day. And the more days you line up, the further along you are in life, and the better it can get. Especially if you tap into those concentric circles of humanity, because there's always somebody someplace who can be a refuge. I believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wish that I would have had this book when I was, 13, 14, 15. It would have helped inordinately. Like I would know I wasn't by myself having these feelings. I wasn't the only one who, had these longings, and I think those themes are very important. Like the book opens with Philbit at 14, I think it is, watching the object of his obsession rather. And I'm sitting here going, yep, I can relate. Can't do anything but watch. Don't want to speak. Don't even want to move, because then they'll see how you walk, and God forbid.
Right. Yeah. That's part of, it's a Southern story, but it's a situation that all of us, if not all of us, most of us can relate to, because we lived it. We know what it's like to see that one person who stirs something in us for the first time and makes us feel like a person, like a real person, rather than this caricature, this shameful being. And,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's Philbit and Knox. Oh, yeah.
I love that component of the story. So, where did your love of language come from?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a tradition in the South of storytelling. Southern literature is just, I love Southern literature. I don't know if I've already talked about this, but there's a cadence to the language that I love. I think I did mention this. So I think my love of storytelling really came from, sitting on the back porch, running around with a tomato sandwich and a glass of sweet tea, and just hearing what was going on around me. And it's been a theme. Storytelling has been a theme throughout my life, I've realized. I've always written. I didn't tell anybody until this, but I've always been a writer. And I started my career as an actor. Believe it or not, I moved to Washington, D.C. after college for an summer acting job, and I never left. And I acted for a number of years. Someone said, "Well, what would I know you from?" And I thought, well, nothing. But but I actually did a Super Bowl halftime commercial. Yeah, and the Super Bowl halftime commercial was so much fun. And my accountant, who I think wanted to be a stand-up comedian, said, "That's the finest work of your career." So I guess that would be, if there's anything to remember me from, that's it. But spending years on the stage, saying the lines of playwrights, in and among, on the stage among all those other actors, with director and the other, people who are part of the theater community, it really was a great training ground to understand the arc of a story really fully. And then I moved to a job at the Library of Congress. My first role there was to help veterans tell their stories for the Veterans History Project, an oral history program. And listening to them tell about these defining moments of their lives it had such a strong, made such a strong impression, a huge impact on me. So those are all storytelling experiences. And reading literature, which we talked about earlier, I think that probably has had the most significant impact on me. Harper Lee, Eudora Welty, Carson McCullers, Truman Capote. I actually, Zora Neale Hurston she did dialogue so beautifully, and it was so simple, but it was so complex and meaningful.
Yes.
She could make something make sense with just the simplest phrase. Today, I love Jesmyn Ward. I love her work. The way she can create these little fragile worlds and these fully hearted people, and just crush them. It will break you to read her story. So those are my inspirations. But just the tradition of Southern literature that's so lyrical and magical and musical just washes over the reader. Those are my inspirations.
I love it. Yeah, it calls to mind like another one of my favorite authors, Poppy Z. Bright, she's a horror author, but her use of language, like she can make the most horrible things beautiful just through the use of language. And that's a skill. That's a definite skill that you definitely possess, the ability to just weave the words together and create an image, but filter it through an emotion. It's not just, a delivery of facts, or narrative elements. There's also you feel the intended emotion of the characters, and that's a skill that even in some of the greatest authors, that little detail isn't necessarily present. So I definitely appreciate that with your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't quite know what to say to that, but I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm glad that your work has touched you so.
It really has. I definitely love the book and highly recommend it. Red Clay Suzie, wherever fine books are sold, please make sure to get a copy.
Yeah. And also, I would add, thank you. And I would also, if I may add, libraries. I know that young people, the people for whom I really wrote the book, they may not be able to afford a book.
Yes.
And so it's one of my goals is for it to be in public libraries, sanctuaries, whether it's hardcover, audiobook, or digital. Young people can get to libraries, and that's really important. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I also, my contribution to the LGBT community in particular is to put this story out there, this affirming story, but also I'm donating a portion of proceeds to the Born This Way Foundation and the Trevor Project for their really important work
Yes.
supporting at-risk youth.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure that everybody out there knows that.
Yes. Thank you for bringing
because
that up.
those organizations have for a long time done so much to support young people who are struggling.
Yes. And I'm definitely going to put the links to those organizations in the notes to this episode because they need our support.
They do.
And I appreciate you for supporting them through this wonderful work. It's ideal, especially in this day and age of, trying to suppress information and banning books. I feel like we've been here before.
Oh yeah, we have. There's a long history of it.
It's insanity.
I remember I was watching the movie Picnic was on television. I was washing dishes and it was running in the background. And there's a character who is an educator talking about book banning, and that film was made in, I think, 1955. So it goes long. Book banning has been around for so long. This is not a new thing. It has fuel under it right now.
It's not.
But it's not new.
Mm-mm.
There's always been a faction of people who've tried to suppress words, and words are so powerful. We have the power to tell our stories. And people say, what's the solution to book banning? Well, number one, just create as many works as you can. They can't ban all of them. But also, don't be afraid to stand up.
And it's sad to say, that in today's climate, this book would be considered something that would be banned. And it's devastating because, like I said, this is a story that so many people, young and old, should experience. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I'm so glad I got to sit and talk with you. And once again, I adore your work and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. It was a joy talking to you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.